tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
It was heartbreaking. You know, we hear of these situations that happen. It's not uncommon for people to seek shelter anywhere they can.
How a Kelowna man wound up trapped inside a garbage truck and why it's shedding light on BC's need for better housing. Plus, a lack of transparency and a need for more communication. The new report evaluating the province's response to COVID. And a startling surprise as the anchor on a BC ferry drops suddenly mid-journey. Passengers tell us what happened next.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. Only the sounds of banging stopped a horrifying situation from ending in tragedy. A man trapped inside the back of a West Kelowna garbage truck. And when he pulled the machine, he was injured and hypothermic. Brady Strachan has our top story tonight on the extremes the homeless are going to for shelter and the risks involved.
This is how some people are keeping warm as temperatures drop into the double digits below freezing.
That's about it. I'm going to take that inside.
James, who asked that we not use his last name, is one of several dozen people sleeping outside in Kelowna's designated homeless camp.
The last 4 days have been pretty bloody cold. Until then, it was okay, but like the night before last, that storm that hit a couple of nights back, it was brutal. I mean, a lot of people's tents were flattened.
With all the city's homeless shelters at capacity, James says it's not surprising to hear one man out in the elements sought refuge in an industrial dumpster.
No, if I didn't have a shelter, I would too. I mean, a dumpster's a logical place. You got shelter and you have insulation built in too.
Police say that man is lucky to be alive and only suffered minor injuries after a garbage truck driver inadvertently dumped him into the back of his truck yesterday morning.
He was quite concerned and because one of the things he does is cycle his compaction, and he figures he did it twice between picking up and stopping the vehicle. So he was quite concerned and a little upset about the possibility of what he was going to find inside the truck.
It happened here in this block of strip malls in West Kelowna, far from any shelters or supports for people forced to live on the streets.
It was heartbreaking. You know, we hear of these situations that happen. It's not uncommon for people to seek shelter anywhere they can, especially something that provides a wind barrier, but it's heartbreaking and it's devastating.
She says 400 people in the central Okanagan are currently homeless. This despite measures from local and provincial governments to open up supportive housing spaces.
We talk about the need for more shelters. What we need is housing. We talk about a homelessness crisis. This is an affordability crisis that leads to homelessness.
She says until governments build more affordable homes or put the incentives in place for the private sector to build them, the issue will only get worse. Back at the homeless camp, James is just hoping to get through this current cold snap.
Yeah, it's brutal. When you're trying to sleep and it's freezing cold, it's no fun.
He says a place to live is a far-off dream right now as he just tries to survive each day outside. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna.
Anchors away is a bit too literal for what happened to a BC ferry this afternoon. Passengers were stunned and stuck when the anchor suddenly let loose. Dan Burt joins us live with more on this. Dan, quite the sailing today.
One for the books and the high seas, Anita. BC Ferry's passengers are familiar with delays due to weather, mechanical issues, big crowds. But this was a new one. Passengers on board the Spirit of British Columbia were startled by a very loud noise and the anchor chain spinning, as you can see, just as they left Active Pass from Swartz Bay heading to Tsawwassen this afternoon. The ship ground to a halt. Canadian press reporter Dirk Meisner was on board.
It went on for about a minute, maybe a minute and a half, and then all this smoke started coming up, like the rust from the anchor or from the links on the anchor. And I started to think, I better get out of here because the windows at the front of the ferry, this thing could go right through the windows and hurt somebody. And I think a lot of people had the same idea as me because we all started to basically run for the back of the ferry.
BC Ferry says there was no danger to passengers or the ship. It says the anchor release was inadvertent and it took time to retrieve it. Meisner says the chief steward did ask everyone to move to the back of the boat while the crew worked on the problem. The sailing was delayed by about an hour and arrived in Tsawwassen around 4:20. The 3 p.m. sailing from Tsawwassen and the 5 p.m. from Swartz Bay were cancelled as a result of this. Also on board this eventful crossing, BC Ferry's board chair and longtime politician Joy McPhail. Meisner notes a few passengers said they wanted their money back, but he says free coffee and hot chocolate helped smooth the rest of the voyage. Anita.
Yeah, not the excitement I'd be looking for, Dan. Thank you. An independent report into BC's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic has some criticisms and some compliments. It was commissioned by the government earlier this year and includes 26 recommendations. Justin McElroy has the details.
The title, Lessons Learned. The report, a 150-page document commissioned by the BC government, but written independently about their handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. That was first commissioned back in March. And since then, the commissioners have talked to hundreds of people and poured over dozens of documents to try and get a sense of what BC did well and not so well. And while at the end of the day, they were not allowed to look into individual decisions made on health policy, they concluded that BC's response was on the whole positive. At the same time, they also criticize many levels of what BC did, including around issues of communication, particularly after the first part of the pandemic, pointing out that questions of how decisions were made and transparency around data and decision-making were lacking compared to other jurisdictions. Ironically, despite that, the BC government released the report on a Friday afternoon, only giving reporters 1 hour to look through the 150 pages before asking questions. Despite this, Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth defended what was available to read and analyze before asking the government for accountability.
The day was booked, I think, some time ago in terms on this particular day. It was done in terms of what else is going on this afternoon. And it's on that basis that the schedule was put together. No one's hiding anything. The report's there for people to read.
And indeed, people can go online and read that report and conclude for themselves whether the government has learned all those lessons. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
And the province and the federal government are touting their plan to make childcare more affordable in BC. And while it has dropped fees significantly for parents, Yasmin Gandam tells us childcare advocates want more.
We're continuing to make childcare more affordable right across the country, including and starting with here in BC.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the new plan will put hundreds of dollars a month back in parents' and guardians' pockets. The newly approved $10 a day spaces are being offered at 61 childcare centres throughout BC, transforming almost 11,000 spaces to $10 a day. Premier Eby says the announcement is very welcome.
At a time when global inflation is driving up costs for families in British Columbia, childcare fees are going down.
Eby says it will also benefit people who are planning to have children.
It helps us respond to the labor shortages we're seeing in our economy. It helps people get to work to build our economy. It helps stressed out families, and it helps build our entire province, and as you heard from the Prime Minister, our entire country.
The province, with help from Ottawa, is also helping about 69,000 families at centres that are not part of the $10 a day program. Their fees are set to drop up to $550 more a month per child. Rayette Dayan has 3 kids. The fee reduction saves her $1,000 a month per child.
This program makes it much easier for the both of us to be able to work a full-time job with peace of mind, knowing that our kids are well taken care of and are benefiting from affordable yet quality education.
Childcare advocates say it's a huge step and they want more.
We have to have more licensed spaces, more licensed programs. We have to make sure that we're investing in educators to work in those programs. But this is a big move for affordability.
The agreement aims to help provinces lower childcare fees by about 50% by the end of this year. So $10 a day childcare is in place by 2026. Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, Richmond.
And more reaction in response to the province's decision to maintain its funding model for children with disabilities, and now increased calls for the province to do more. Last week, the government said it's dropping its plan to end individualized funding for kids with autism and put a pause on hubs that were meant to provide services for children with a wide variety of disabilities. But advocates say thousands of kids with other special needs like fetal alcohol syndrome disorder and Down syndrome still receive little to no support from the province.
Change was and still is urgently required. The current exclusionary criteria of CYSN services infringes on the rights of those children who do not have the right diagnosis and are left with no supports at all.
BC's representative for children and youth is calling for interim funding now, in addition to long-term stable funding for children with special needs. Well, day 5 of the BC Coroner's inquest into the death of 17-year-old Trayvon Chalafu Desjardins, found dead in his group home bedroom closet. Today, as Karen Larson reports, testimony was heard from the Abbotsford police officer who found him. And a warning, this story contains distressing details.
At Coroner's Court in Burnaby, Constable Christian Drabosenig testified he found the body of Trayvon Chalafu Desjardins shortly after being dispatched to the Abbotsford group home to collect Trayvon's DNA for the missing persons file. This was 4 days after the Indigenous teen had first been reported missing by group home staffer Murray McMaster. Upon arrival, McMaster told the officer he had searched Trayvon's bedroom and had no new information. McMaster then mentioned a smell. Drabosenig asked to see Trayvon's bedroom in the basement and quickly discovered his body hanging in the closet. Moments later, the officer found 3 suicide notes, 2 face up on the bedside table and another on the floor. In earlier testimony, McMaster said he had searched the room multiple times, but didn't recall if he looked in the closet and didn't recall seeing the suicide notes. The inquest continues next week. Karen Larson, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC's police watchdog says there are reasonable grounds for possible charges against 3 Mounties after officers shot and killed a Wet'suwet'en man on Vancouver Island last July. It's news his mother finds relieving and painful.
This is the beginning of a fight that's going to last a long time.
38-year-old Jared Lowndes was shot and killed by RCMP officers outside a Tim Hortons in Campbell River last summer. At the time, police said they stopped him on an outstanding warrant and he fled, but was stopped when police cars rammed his vehicle. Now, the Independent Investigations Office says it's determined that reasonable grounds exist to believe that 3 officers may have committed offenses in relation to various uses of force.
We knew that they had done wrong. We knew that everything that they did that day was wrong. Now we have to wait for Crown and wait for Crown to make their decision.
The IIO is now working on a report for the Crown for it to consider charges in the next few months. In the U.S. tonight, a federal court judge has dismissed the remaining charges against Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou. Meng was detained at YVR in December of 2018 on behalf of the U.S. Her detention here led to a 3-year saga that strained relations between Canada and China. Last year, a deal that included eventually dismissing the U.S. charges was finalized, and Meng returned to China. Shortly after, 2 Canadians, Michael Spavor and Michael Krovig, were released from Chinese custody. They had been rounded up by Chinese officials just days after Meng's arrest. The Canadian government has deep concerns about a possible new hurdle for the forest products industry. Concerns that came to light because someone leaked an ambassador's letter. Lindsay Duncombe shows us exports to Europe could be at risk and why this issue will soon come to a head.
2 billion trees. You've probably heard us share that number before.
The Trudeau government presents itself as planters of trees, protectors of the environment. But a leaked letter from Canada's ambassador to the EU reveals Canada is concerned about its ability to sell trees under proposed new rules in Europe. Specifically, EU legislation to restrict trade with countries that aren't deforestation-free. The ambassador says it would mean increased costs, be burdensome, and risk negatively impacting trade.
There's a lot of sustainable actors in Canada's forest products industry, but not all of them are. They're taking out old growth, carbon-rich, wildlife-critical habitat.
One Canadian concern that the EU regulation refers to forest degradation, not just deforestation. The official definition of deforestation is a forest that has permanently been changed for a different use. Clear cuts like this are still defined as forests because they have been replanted.
There's no globally recognized definition of what degradation is. We know there is ongoing work to find a global definition of what degradation might be. And that level playing field is really important for a forestry powerhouse like Canada.
The leaked letter comes weeks before a UN biodiversity conference in Montreal, where advocates will argue species can't survive when trees are cut down. Expect a spotlight on how Trudeau can live up to his green promises in a country dependent on resource industries.
We're going to continue to lead the world in how we protect nature, how we demonstrate sustainable practices, and how we include Canadians and their concerns around it.
Words outlining a political balancing act, saving the trees and selling them too. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Home sales around Metro Vancouver are down as inflation continues to take a toll on the real estate market. The Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver says there were just over 1,600 sales last month. That's less than half the number of units that sold in the same month last year. It's 37% below the 10-year sales average for November. But don't expect any deals on homes just yet because the benchmark price sat at $1.13 million, only 1.5% drop from October of 2022. Okay, it wouldn't be the first Friday of December without CBC's Food Bank Day. Over 3 decades, we've helped raise millions here at the CBC for those most in need. The last couple of years, of course, have been pretty quiet because of the pandemic, but as our Premji explains, today was a day to restart the party.
Hey, it's you. You're back 36 years later. We've still got the Food Bank Day going on, but the last 2 years, you know, they've been virtual. This year, though, people are back in. We've got a live studio audience. We've got an exciting day. Let's take a look at what's happening. Let's go.
The crowd returns. A live studio audience, guests, music, and more. Even some notable faces and voices.
A whole group of people came in their nightgowns and house coats.
Phones going off the hook. And a visit from one of Santa's apprentices.
Merry Christmas!
He just happens to be the chair of Food Banks BC, too.
We give because we want others to give. And this is just the greatest day for all of the food banks around the province and for the people that need help, especially when things get a little bit harder financially.
More than a year after the devastating fire, the people of Lytton still are suffering. They have mostly been forgotten. Christina, thank you.
All coming together for the very same reason.
First one we had back in the 80s, we actually did it from the old cafeteria. It was just one radio show, so that year we raised $462.
But now, over the years,
we've raised now $16 million.
Sure, it's a fun day filled with nostalgia.
Quite possible that I was at the first CBC Food Bank Day. I don't want to do the math, but it is quite possible.
And beautiful moments.
Maybe it's much too early in the game.
But most importantly, it's a day with a purpose that runs deep for so many.
So we can help support the food and help donate, help to support each other.
We don't know what our personal circumstances are or how they may change. It's not about judging, it's about kindness, and that's what, we should be doing more of in the world.
And that's what food banks do. They give people that help when they need it most.
All right, thank you. Well, although the phone lines will be closing, that doesn't mean you can't continue to donate. If you're still thinking about it, you have until December 31st at midnight. Zara Premji, CBC News, Vancouver.
Hey, we are very excited because look at this. We have raised $1.5 million so far. And like Zara said, there's still a lot of time to donate. So you can do that on our website, cbc.ca/BC. Let's get those numbers up.
That's amazing.
It is awesome. And I know you got to take part in some of the festivities today.
Anita, it is so nice to be around people in person once again. The buzz, the giving. Yeah, it was pretty lovely today and festive.
Yeah, and you've got your festive shirt on, so you fit right in for sure.
I went full sparkle, full sparkle. To make up for perhaps a little gray and cool day, everyone was, I think, happy to get indoors into a warm studio. Temperatures were hovering around 0 for most of the day. And yes, we are tracking fresh rain and snow crossing the strait. Right now, all of this purple you see on the radar, that is snow falling across the island where we do have snowfall warnings. As it moves over the warm water of the strait, it's coming down as rain. It's going to be a mixed bag for Metro Vancouver, but a lot of it will be snow, especially as it starts to bring down the cooler temperatures from above. Even though our station is saying 1 degree, I think it's going to fall as snow for many. So special weather statement in place for Metro Vancouver for 2 to 5 centimeters tonight. Doesn't sound like much, but that's a fresh shot of snow on top of what is already very slippery, hardened ice, where that is still on the ground. And that snowfall warning in place, particularly for the Malahat Summit, 25 centimeters. And then we have those cold outflow winds, -20 wind chills tonight through central and northern coastal sections. So taking you sort of around that 1 over the next couple of hours, a dramatic clear out tomorrow morning and a beautiful 4 with sunshine in the afternoon. Speaking of beautiful, just had to show you this shot from Prince George yesterday where they saw beautiful sundogs. And that's where you get sort of these twin suns on either side of the main event. This is when we get high altitude crystals refracting the sunlight at perfect 22-degree angles. So always a treat when we get to see that in the cold weather, Anita.
That is a beautiful shot. I don't think I've ever seen that, Johanna. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
And while much of Metro Vancouver could be looking like a winter wonderland, wonderful evening, it really does make the perfect backdrop for outdoor skating. And another free skating rink is now open, this time at the shipyards on the North Shore. Yeah, you can lace up your skates at the region's largest covered outdoor skating rink at 12,000 square feet. The plaza will be open every day between 1 and 8 p.m. through to March, and that's, of course, weather dependent. Adults can rent skates for $7, and it's $5 for kids 12 and under. The need has never been greater. As food prices soar and the affordability gap grows, the pressures faced by food banks to keep up is next. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. A pilot project between a local grocer in Calgary and the food bank there has turned into a major success story. The experiment was launched last April in an attempt to gather fresh food nearing the best before dates. Take a look.
Nothing wrong with the product, just a little bit rough, but it's not sellable for the store, but people can eat it. When I see this go into the garbage, it makes me sad.
We would have either sent the meat for compost or recycling, and in some cases it would be just discarded.
We have a few different ways that we would manage food, so it is one that we really recognize. Is there a better way to be able to get this food into the hands of those people who need it?
350 plus hampers a day that we're pushing out, so we're feeding thousands of Calgarians each week.
16?
If we can somehow keep food out of the compost and be able to rescue it and bring it to others that need food, fresh food, that's really important for us.
Every day we go and we look for best before dates, and we pull them and get them prepared for the food bank.
This is a program that started as a pilot in August of 2021. We started with 6 stores.
So we check for our dates. 5 days a week, we rescue food that is no longer able to be sold for various reasons.
This is the product that we discarded today, and we freeze it for 24 hours prior to sending it to the food bank. This is product that we pulled yesterday morning that is all frozen solid and is ready to go to the food bank this morning.
We get it back to the food bank, quickly turn it around and get it into our food hampers so that people that are experiencing food insecurity get the freshest food possible.
after that pilot. We rolled it out to all 24 of our food stores since then. We also work with other partner food banks outside of our city as well for those stores outside of Calgary. And since that time, we've donated over 1 million pounds of food, which is a number we are really, really proud of.
There has definitely been an increase, especially in like dairy products, fresh produce. We get a lot of meat from them too, which is really, really helpful. A lot of bread, stuff like that. So we've been seeing these products kind of come in here a lot more consistently, which is really, really nice to see.
It's not really much more work. It's just a matter of handling the meat differently after we pull it off the counter, but the workload is about the same actually. So it's really a win-win program for us and those less fortunate.
I feel 100% better. I'm from Jamaica and we don't waste nothing. We eat everything. So I'm glad to see that Co-op is doing something great for the city of Calgary.
All right, so as you've seen today, it is Food Bank Day here at CBC Vancouver News. The annual event is now in its 36th year, and it is the one where the CBC has special programming with the goal of raising money for food banks across the province. So why do we do it? Well, Benit Brach tells us.
It's Food Bank Day here at CBC Vancouver. It's a big day to make an impact. Let's see what the day means for your hosts here at CBC. What does today mean for you?
Oh, today, the Food Bank Day is so important to connect people who want to reach out and help their neighbors, and to connect them to a way of doing that and of expressing that generosity that everybody feels, especially this time of year.
I love this time of year. You know, we do stories all year long about the need in the community, and I guess this is our chance at CBC British Columbia to sort of step up and do something about it.
It's really about making sure that we are there for our neighbors, for our friends, for our communities, making sure that everybody has the ability to survive in this world that has become so much more expensive and so much harder to live in.
And what's the feeling of this day?
Joy, being able to give back. We've got music, we've got people excited to be here. We don't have the tours, but we'll get back to that eventually. It's that idea of making sure that people have enough to eat, literally, or being able to buy it themselves with funds.
A lot of the donations were small ones that came from individuals who found a little bit to help and to give. And so that is really what's most touching about Food Bank is people and just finding it in their hearts to give what they can.
This is by far one of my favorite days of the year. There's just this energy and this spirit of kindness, and honestly, to see the numbers spike up through the day is actually really emotional.
Why does today matter?
I think today is a great day to give back. We know we've had a really hard year, hard couple of years, and with rising interest rates and foodflation and all these things really hitting people in the pocketbook, there are a lot of people in dire need. And so this is a way to say, hey, we hear you and we're trying to help.
Today matters because I don't want to throw statistics at you, but about 1 in every 3 clients of a food bank in British Columbia is a kid, is a child. The price of everything is going up. Food banks in BC are seeing about a 23% increase in the number of people who are turning up.
Today matters because people matter. And it matters to think about everybody that you live in this community with, and to think about the people that you care about, the people that you don't know yet, and just to come together towards a common goal.
That's right. Coming together toward a common goal is important. And joining me now is Dan Huang-Taylor, Executive Director of Food Banks BC. Dan, I really want to talk about the people who are using the food bank, because I think still, even after all these years, people sort of think they have this image in their head of who the users are. So can you break that, I guess, that for us?
You're right. It's it's shifted. There is a traditional view of who a food bank or a typical food bank user might be. In the last year, we have seen this leveling happening, where there are more people needing to access food banks than we've really ever seen, which has included a lot of people who are working full-time. So you've got full-time parents, both working and unable to get enough food for their kids to fill their fridge, put it on the table. It's something that has been a trend that we've seen for a while now. And it's, your neighbours, your co-workers, they could be accessing food bank services.
Yeah, I remember interviewing a woman a couple years ago, and I was shocked when I met her. She didn't look like the typical food bank user, but what is the typical food bank user, right? Given the high cost of living now, are you finding that fewer people are also able to donate because they're stretched thin?
Donations have dropped as well. It's been described as a perfect storm. You've got more expensive products out there, which is creating a greater demand for services because people can't afford to make ends meet, so they're turning to food banks. All food banks purchase food, so it's more expensive for them to get the food that they need to supply their clients with a mix of nutritious options. And
it used to be every $1 could supply $3 of food, right?
$1 would equate to 3 meals. It's closer to $1 equates to 2 meals.
Wow, okay.
And we are talking about a drop in donations as well. People have less ability to give food and money to food banks, and that has created this extra strain on the system.
I do want to end on a little bit of a positive note because you were answering phones all day for CBC Food Bank Day. What inspired you from those phone calls and all the people that are being so generous?
Well, first of all, the number, the money that was raised. I mean, we broke another record on top of 2 years where we never expected to see the sheer outpouring of generosity that we've seen. And this campaign will continue for the rest of the month. So we know this is going to be another outstanding year in terms of the amount that we're going to raise for food banks in BC, the impact that will have. And it really has been just an inspiring day and a reminder that there's so much generosity in this province. We're so grateful for the support.
There absolutely is. Dan, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
We do want to take a look at that total once more. So right now, you have donated more than $1.5 million. That is absolutely incredible. There is still time to donate, so please go to our website, cbc.ca/BC, to find that food bank donation link, and stick with us. We've got more news to come.
The experts always say this kind of thing is normal. It's winter and storms happen. But when the tree falls on your house or your power line, it gets your attention.
I heard a big bang, and so the power went out. Looked out in my backyard, see if any trees had blown down.
It turned out that trees were blown down all over British Columbia's Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island. In the morning, you could see them everywhere, men with chainsaws trying to get the trees off rooftops.
And the lights all came on and came outside, and this tree had entered the house.
And the extent of the damage became clear. It turned out that all those trees coming down caused tens of thousands of people on both sides of the Strait of Georgia to lose power.
Two major areas. Lower Mainland at the peak, we had about 32,000 customers out, and Vancouver Island, probably 45 to 50,000 customers out at the peak.
You can see some of these thunderstorm-type clouds pushing onto Vancouver Island there as well.
It seems it was those thunderstorms that made the winds even more severe.
So we had gusts, about 115 kilometers per hour reported just off of Richmond and the Sea Island area.
And that is where a near disaster unfolded at the Roberts Bank coal terminal that juts out into the Gulf south of Vancouver. Two giant conveyor belts used for loading freighters buckled like tin in a huge blast of wind. They were still operating at the time despite a wind warning. Although the order to shut them down had just gone out, it was too late. One big gust was all it took.
And then along came one at 100 kilometers and blew both ship loaders off their tracks, one into the water, the other into the ship that was loading. So both operators one rode the cab into the water and the other rode the cab into the ship.
The one that hit the ship scrambled back down the conveyor belt, and the one that hit the water swam to shore despite broken ribs. Both men are in hospital, but neither suffered life-threatening injuries. But it was a wild night, and more high winds are in the forecast for tonight. Ferry, CBC News, Vancouver.
Tonight, people are still processing the news that a serial killer may have killed 4 Indigenous women in Winnipeg. There's a lot of pain, grief, and calls for police and prosecutors to do more. Cameron McIntosh has more from one of the First Nations where 2 of the victims are from.
Tobacco, sacred medicine, prepared to accompany prayers for 2 women from Long Plain First Nation, who police say were slain in Winnipeg.
It's been difficult for many, even for myself, just trying to help support the families.
Police say Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron, along with Rebecca Contois and a woman only identified by this jacket, were murdered by Jeremy Skibicki, who appeared in court to hear first-degree murder charges. His lawyer says he will plead not guilty.
Absolutely, yep. Presumption of innocence, of course.
Skibicki had an online profile where he claimed links to a far-right group and posted violent sentiments. He was arrested earlier this year when Contois' remains were found at this apartment and a Winnipeg landfill. Evidence gathered then led to the 3 other murder charges.
We believe that it's likely the remains of these other victims are in the landfill. We just have no ability to know where that is and where to commence a search.
So police say that search won't happen. That's not sitting well with the families. Because the victims are Indigenous, there are also calls for prosecutors to focus on hate as an aggravating factor.
There's a crisis. There's something wrong, and we've been saying for too long.
They might say, well, it's already a murder, but it's more than that to the community.
From the federal government, a stark acknowledgement on the vulnerability of Indigenous women.
I think it's very difficult to talk about success because what we see is this pattern repeating itself.
At Long Plain, they're living it. A constant fear of what news may come next.
This is not the first time that this has happened. We're always having to come together at vigils for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls.
That's Cameron McIntosh reporting for us tonight from Winnipeg. Canada's economy added a modest 10,000 jobs last month, with the jobless rate falling to 5.1%. But inflation remains stubbornly higher than the wage increase. And Nisha Patel explains that could have an effect on what policymakers decide.
At Toronto's St. Lawrence Market, businesses are desperate for workers.
We are functioning like with one dishwasher where we're open 14 hours a day. You can't have one person working 14 hours a day.
And as the busy holiday season approaches, they need more staff to stay up and running.
Or they show up for the interview, they get the job, they don't show up for the job, or they just no response at all. It's been very difficult.
But while some sectors were hiring last month, like finance and manufacturing, others were firing.
So we're expecting a pretty rough year in terms of the tech sector and the broader economy over the next 12 months.
Tech firms have seen a sharp slowdown this year. Communitech just laid off 10% of its staff as it prepares for tough times.
I've been through a whole bunch of recessions before, and I think pretty sober about you got to work a little bit harder.
But for those companies still trying to attract workers, many have to offer higher pay. Average hourly wages rose by 5.6% to more than $32 an hour in November, compared to the same time a year ago. While many paychecks still aren't keeping up with the cost of living, it marks 6 months of wage gains that are above 5%, something policymakers are watching closely.
The Bank of Canada is going to look at this labor market as still too tight, still too hot for its comfort.
Steep wage gains and robust jobs growth came in south of the border, too, where U.S. employers added 263,000 jobs last month, despite the central bank's recent efforts to cool the economy with aggressive interest rate hikes.
They've already raised rates a lot, and a lot of the impact of that on employment won't show up until we move further into 2023.
So with a labor market that remains resilient, the pressure on central banks continues, with economists predicting interest rates will go up again next week. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, Kanye West has again been suspended from Twitter over anti-Semitism. It comes a day after praising Hitler in a long and rambling interview. Democrats and Republicans were swift to condemn the rapper's comments, but as Paul Hunter points out, Donald Trump remains silent.
As the latest signal, the threat of anti-Semitism in America is back in the spotlight, with mailboxes in St. Louis stuffed this week with anti-Semitic leaflets. Consider President Joe Biden felt the need to now tweet this. The Holocaust, he wrote, happened. Hitler was a demonic figure. And he urged political leaders to be calling out and rejecting anti-Semitism wherever it hides. This as rapper Kanye West, now known as Ye, is again suspended from Twitter for anti-Semitism after posting an image of a swastika inside the Star of David, and after praising Adolf Hitler on a right-wing conspiracy theory talk show. All of that after former President Donald Trump, a longtime friend of Ye, sat down for dinner with the rapper along with anti-Semitic white nationalist Nick Fuentes. Slammed for that by many, including by some Republicans, it's left others seemingly still careful what they say about Trump, who's yet to condemn Ye or Fuentes. Here's senior Republican Kevin McCarthy.
The president didn't know who he was, and the president has given up. You know what? He's been. So he knew who Kanye West is. He didn't know who Fuentes is.
And North Dakota Senator Kevin Kramer.
But as you know, President Trump doesn't condemn a lot of people who support him.
Reigniting an old question for Republicans broadly: how and whether to call out the still powerful former president. But on the urgency to call out anti-Semitism anywhere, this today from the grandson of a Holocaust survivor.
The only way anti-Semitism can get driven back down underground where it belongs is if those who espouse a far different worldview stand up and say, this is wrong, there's a better way.
The question now for Trump: how hard will his own party push him on that? Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
Now, as Paul mentioned, Kanye appeared on a right-wing conspiracy talk show, InfoWars, hosted by Alex Jones. Well, there's also news about Jones tonight. The conspiracy theorist has filed for personal bankruptcy. In papers filed today, Jones claimed $1 to $10 million in assets against $1 to $10 billion in debts. Jones was ordered to pay more than $1 billion to families of Sandy Hook shooting victims after his second defamation trial this fall. For years, the InfoWar host claimed that the massacre was a hoax. Well, hospitals at a breaking point, doctors and nurses stretched thin. As the RSV wave dips, another rises, this time the flu. The alternating waves of illness facing Canadians is next.
Land Back is a CBC original podcast where we uncover land theft in Canada and look at how Indigenous people are taking it all back.
And that's what empowered nations and empowered people to just literally steal land.
This is a consequence of your actions.
And it's time to give land back.
Land Back is out now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
The eruption of the world's largest volcano on the island of Hawaii is drawing a crowd. People have been gathering at night to see the blazing river of lava tumbling down the mountainsides. And while there is concern about infrastructure for now, the highway cutting through the Big Island is actually serving as a tourist attraction. The flow of lava is slow right now, but it remains unpredictable. And there is risk from the release of hazardous gas known as VOG. That's fog created by a volcano. Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe is here now. And Joe, you're also an earth scientist, and you've been to the island of Hawaii, or Big Island. But pregnancy once again stopped you from going up that volcano. Now, I feel like this happens often with you, Joe, even though you've only been pregnant once.
It's true, Anita. Yes. I was also offered a flight in a jet that was going to, push G's that were also unhealthy to a pregnant woman. But yeah, I wanted to go up to the top of Mauna Loa. But once you get to oxygen levels, there is a bit of a risk. So obviously, I just have to go back. But one of the reasons, so I totally get the draw from the crowd. One of the reasons I wanted to go to the top is it is the longest continual observation or recording device of CO2 concentrations on planet Earth. It has taken the longest recording of CO2 all the way from the 1950s. This is called the Keeling graph, and you can see the rise as we head out towards the 2020s. It is now on pause because of the volcano. So a little bit of a concern that we're not actually getting those CO2 measurements. We're taking them in other parts of the world, but again, Mauna Loa is the longest. So yes, one way or another, I'm getting back there, and I will also probably be getting in a jet sometime soon. This low pressure system is our story for today here on the ground. I wanted to show you the big picture. It's been swirling off the coast. It's what brought those flakes flying earlier today, and it's what's going to bring that shot of snow and some rain to lower elevations in the next few hours, really ramping up around 8 or 9. I think 10, 11, midnight is when we'll see some heavier precipitation. It clears right out around 7, 8 a.m. So it's really just an overnight story. Here's Saturday, 1 p.m. That low has sunk south and high pressure builds in across the province. This is an Arctic high, so it's keeping that cold air locked in with those northerly winds, and that's why we've got those outflow winds in place for central and northern coastal sections. Tuesday into Wednesday, we're watching for more precip as we get a Pacific system moving in. We'll have to really watch that forecast. It's basically dry through the weekend and through Monday, watching Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for snow changing over to rain as we get that Pacific air. Watch the temperatures across the province, and also watch Alberta, where they were under an extreme cold alert for the whole province for today. Minus 14 is the high in Williams Lake for a Sunday. And then as we head into early next week, you can see those minus double-digit highs remaining. So cold and clear through the weekend. We'll be watching for flurries on Tuesday. I'll have to keep my eye on these 3 days. A little hard to say exactly what will happen, but there will be precip. Some will be rain, some will be snow. Anita, it is a very La Nina forecast, so I expect more of this in the months to come.
All right, sounds good, Joe. We'll talk to you next week, I guess.
Sounds good.
Thanks. The World Health Organization is reminding countries to remain vigilant in the fight against COVID-19.
Gaps in surveillance, testing, sequencing, and vaccination are continuing to create the perfect conditions for a new variant of concern to emerge that could cause significant mortality.
More than 6.5 million lives have been lost to the disease in nearly 3 years. The UN Health Agency estimates about 90% of the world's population has some level of immunity from prior infection or vaccinations. The WHO chief says the emergency phase of the pandemic is behind us, but the concern is not over. They call on countries to seek a balance for controlling the virus with its impact on people's well-being. Now, flu cases are climbing across the country, but RSV and COVID-related illnesses are also circulating in communities. Now, infectious disease experts say having one virus, like a common cold, could keep others at bay as each bug effectively takes turns. Christine Birack looks at why Canadians could face alternating waves of infection from different viruses this winter.
COVID is still simmering. RSV cases in children appear to be stabilizing, and the latest data show flu is rising fast. But instead of a triple-demic this winter, where all three surge at once, some doctors are predicting Canadians may face alternating waves of those viruses.
I expect some overlap in the circulation of these respiratory viruses, but I think it's unlikely that they will have their peak of circulation or a peak of activity exactly at the same time.
Dr. Guy Boivin is a Canada Research Chair in Emerging Viruses. He says respiratory viruses can interfere with each other thanks to a compound released in our bodies after an infection.
Some viruses will produce more interferon than others.
When a cell is infected by a virus, it signals the cell to produce interferon. Interferon then moves out and attaches onto nearby cells, allowing them to block viruses more easily, giving you some protection.
How long it will last, this interference phenomenon in humans, is still a matter of debate.
It's still in the realm of research.
Dr. Ellen Foxman studies viral interference at Yale. She notes in 2009, the H1N1 pandemic, known as swine flu, swept the globe. But in some countries, the surge of a common cold virus appeared to suppress flu for months.
And only when that rhinovirus wave went away did the swine flu really take off in Europe.
The interferon doesn't stay elevated for all that long.
Infectious disease specialist Dr. Alison McGeer says the research is interesting, but
it's not like you can't have both infections.
At 6 weeks old, Diego Brulo was hospitalized for days.
So right away they knew that he had RSV and rhinovirus and enterovirus.
He's now healthy and back home. And research shows up to 30% of infections include more than one virus.
Get your flu shot, get your COVID booster, wear your mask indoors.
Scientists studying viral interference say this winter will be unpredictable. But with more research, they're hoping they can better predict viral waves in the future so that public health officials can get ahead of them. Christine Birack, CBC News, Toronto.
Hurrying hard at 92. Coming up, a curler who isn't afraid to let a sport sweep her away.
The smokehouse used to be, this is the smokehouse me and my dad built. Like I was only like 10 years old.
Norman Betsina is showing the remnants of a warehouse he said had been in his family for decades. Its demolition was the boiling point of a land dispute between Betsina and the Yellowknives Dene First Nation.
Liar! White man! Kill you, white man!
Betsina was at work at the Nekalacho rare earth mine when a contractor showed up at the land on October 17th. But he told his cousin, Michael Lafferty, to watch the land for him.
So I ran over there and I told that guy to stop. He wouldn't stop, but when I told him, I yelled in front of him to stop because that personal belongings belonged to them, Norman. And he come out and he said he was going to beat me up if I didn't move.
Betsina said no one from the band office informed him they would be demolishing the structure.
I never gave him no permission. And they just do what they think they can, whatever they want to do. They're like dictators, you know.
Lena Black is the assistant CEO of the YKDFN. Black wrote that what was demolished was a derelict shed, and it was ordered to be demolished as its proximity to the school presented a fire hazard. The Yellowknives Dene First Nation said in an email it has a band council resolution for the property, but the document isn't ready for distribution and couldn't be shared. Betsina, however, said the land has belonged to his family for generations.
It's been my family. My grandpa used to own this, and then he passed it on to my mother, my late mother, Muriel Betsina, and my grandpa's name was Edward Blondin. And when they first started building the houses down here, he got a house, and My mother signed it over to my sister, my late sister Diane Bettina, and then she had cancer, so she couldn't deal with this anymore. She couldn't deal with the band anymore, how they're harassing her and everything, and you know, she's all stressed out. She didn't want to deal with it anymore, so she signed it over to me, and she told me not to give up the lot.
Bettina said he planned to one day set up a trailer on the property, but for now, he said he will be getting a lawyer and plans to take the matter to civil court. Luke Carroll, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Well, age shouldn't hold you back, right? Well, it's not keeping one woman away from the rink. Colleen Jones talks to the star of a curling club in Nova Scotia.
How often do you come to the curling club?
Tuesday and Thursday, every week.
Jean McKeel's pulling into the parking lot at the Lunenburg Curling Club. And you took this up late, did you?
When I was 80.
If you didn't know, taking up any sport at 80 is just not common. What do you like about curling?
I just love it because I'm not one of these people that can sit still and do nothing.
Get in there. Let's see how good you are. But here she is at 92, going strong. Game time. She's playing second stone. One of her teammates, Haley Ollenbach, is 31. She and Jean are sweeping the rock. Haley is the youngest on the ice, and Jean, 61 years older, is still leaping over rocks. Nice hopping over the rocks.
I want to know if I'm the oldest woman in curling.
She just has fun. She likes the exercise, she likes to sweep, and she makes shots. That's right. Now, Jean used to have a traditional curling slide, but 2 years ago she took a nasty fall on the ice outside of the curling rink on an icy, snowy day. It left her with a broken jaw and a broken finger, and while others might think of throwing in the towel, not Jean. Nice shot, Jean. Because her broken finger didn't heal properly, she simply switched to stick curling. Give this up? Never.
Absolute joy, because I've got a lot of friends here, and when you're alone, you need friends. And some of the people here have done absolutely amazing things.
By the way, can she shoot?
She does. Put us behind the 8 ball all the time.
That's a nice shot. Tell me what you think of Jean.
She's amazing. Even for her age, or whether she's young or old, she's just an amazing person.
Amazing, yes. And for Jean McKeel, age is truly just a number. Colleen Jones, CBC News, Lunenburg.
All right. I hope I get to be that active at her age. I definitely need all of the secrets. That brings the end to our show tonight on CBC Vancouver, but you can still donate to CBC Vancouver Food Bank Day. We have raised more than $1.5 million so far. All you have to go do is go to our website and you can find out where to donate. Good night.